viewers, and welcome to another chapter of reading. So let's get started. We're in for a good one. Chapter 10, The Marauder's Map. And as you can see, I'm actually fitting with my PJ shirt. Madame Pomfrey insisted on keeping Harry in the hospital wing for the rest of the weekend. Oh, Madame Pomfrey, we love you anyway. He didn't argue or complain, but he wouldn't let her throw away the shattered remnants of his Nimbus 2000. Honestly, I would keep the remnants too. I have a strange knack for keeping rare things. Like this, toothpick, for example. I kept it because I liked the gold sparkly stuff on top. He knew he was being stupid. Nope. He's not being stupid. He has every right to keep the remnants. Knew that the Nimbus was beyond repair, but Harry couldn't help it. He felt as though he lost one of his best friends. Aww. Hugging Harry again. Oh, this early, wow. Never expected it, did you? That's also like a telling foreshadowing to what happens in Goblet of Fire. Not saying what in particular, but it's good foreshadowing, right? He had a stream of visitors, all intent on cheering him up. Hey, I would cheer him up too! I have this natural instinct to make everyone feel happy when they're at their woes. Hagrid sent him a bunch of earwiggy flowers. What are earwiggy flowers? I'm gonna search that up when this chapter is done. That looks like yellow cabbages. Yeah, I like cabbages, but I don't think I've had them yellow. And Ginny Weasley, blushing furiously, turned up with the get well card that she made herself, which sang shrilly unless Harry kept it shut under his bowl of fruit. Oh, Harry and Ginny. We love you. We truly do. The Gryffindor team visited again on Sunday morning. Well, just Thursday evening. This time accompanied by Wood, who told Harry in a all that sort of voice that he didn't blame him in the slightest. Ron and Hermione left Harry's bedside only at night. But nothing anyone said or did could make Harry feel any better, because they only knew half of what was troubling him. He hadn't told anyone about the Grim, not even Ron and Hermione, because he knew Ron would panic and Hermione would scoff. Yeah, that's probably accurate. The fact remained, however, that it had now appeared twice, and both appearances had been followed by near-fatal accidents. For the first time, he had nearly been run over on the night bus. The second, fallen 50 feet from his broomstick. Was the Grim going to haunt him until he actually died? No. Was he going to spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder for the beast? Nope. And then there were the Dementors. Harry felt sick and humiliated every time he thought of them. Everyone said the Dementors were horrible, but no one else collapsed every time they went near one. No one else heard echoes in their head of their dying parents, because Harry now knew who that screaming voice belonged to now. He heard her words, heard them over and over again during the night hours in the hospital wing while he lay awake, staring at the strips of moonlight on the ceiling. When the Dementors approached him, he heard the last moments of his mother's life, her attempts to protect him, Harry, from Voldemort, and Voldemort's laughter before he murdered her. Harry dozed fitfully, sinking into dreams full of flaming rotted hands. Ugh, what a visual. And petrified, pleading, jerking awake to dwell again on his mother's voice. It was a relief to return to the noise and bustle of the main school on Monday. No. I'd rather much stick to the isolation and not so crowded halls. Thank you. Where he was forced to think about other things, even if he had to endure Draco Malfoy's taunting. Malfoy was almost beside himself with glee at Gryffindor's defeat. He had finally taken off his bandages. Wow. It took, what, 3 chapters to get him to stop his charade? Could be 4. I haven't really counted. Either way, it took him that long to not carry it on so much. Anyway. And celebrated having the full use of both arms again by doing spirited imitations of Harry falling off his room. I really would love to give Draco a run for my money. And that's saying something. Malfoy spent much of their next potions class doing Dementor imitations across the dungeon. Ron finally cracked and thrown a large, slippery crocodile heart at Malfoy, which hit him in the face and caused Snape to take 50 points from Gryffindor. Honorable as that was, Ron, you really shouldn't throw anything at Draco. Just use sarcasm. Oh look, we're at our first piece of dialogue. If Snape's teaching offense against Doggotts again, I'm just giving off, said Ron as they headed toward Lupin's classroom after lunch. Check who's in there, Hermione. Hermione peered around the classroom door. It's okay. Professor Lupin was back at work. It certainly looked as though he had been ill. His old robes were hanging more loosely on him, and there were dark shadows beneath his eyes. Nevertheless, he smiled at the class as they took their seats, and they burst at once into an explosion of complaints about Snape's behavior while Lupin had been ill. It's not fair. He was only filling in. Why should he give us homework? We don't know anything about werewolves. 2 rolls of parchment. Did you tell Professor Snape we haven't covered them yet? Lupin asked frowningly. The babble broke out again. Yes, but he said we were really behind. He wouldn't listen. 2 rolls of parchment. Professor Lupin smiled at the look of indignation on every face. Don't worry. I'll speak to Professor Snape. You don't have to do the essay. Oh no, said Hermione, looking very disappointed. I've already finished it. Poor Hermione. Your love of tests and knowledge. They had a very enjoyable lesson. Professor Lupin brought along a glass box containing a hinky pond, a little one-legged creature who looked as though he were made of wisp and smoke, rather frail and harmless looking. Lost travelers into box, said Professor Lupin as they took notes. You notice the lantern dangling from his hand? Up ahead. People follow the light. Then the hinky pump made a horrible squelching noise against the glass. When the bell rang, everyone gathered up their things and headed toward the door. Harry mumbled, wait a moment, Harry, Lupin called. I'd like a wad. Harry doubled back and watched Professor Lupin covering the hinky pug's box with a cloth. I heard about the match, said Lupin, turning back to his desk and starting to pile books into his briefcase. And I'm sorry about your broomstick. Is there any chance of fixing it? No, said Harry. The tree smashed it to bits. Lupin sighed. They planned to build Walking Willow the same year that I arrived at Hogwarts. People used to play a game, trying to get near enough to touch the trap. In the end, a boy called Davy Gudgeon near the Austin Eye, and we were forbidden to go near it. No broomstick would have a chance. Did you hear about the Dementors too? Said Harry with difficulty. Lupin looked at him quickly. Yes, I did. I don't think any of us have seen Professor Dumbledore that angry. They've been growing restless for some time, furious at his refusal to let him inside the ground. I suppose they were the reason you fell? Yes, said Harry. He hesitated. Then the question he had to ask burst from him before he could stop himself. Why? Why do they affect me like that? Am I just... It has nothing to do with weakness, said Professor Lupin sharply, as though he read Harry's mind. The Dementors affect you worse than the others because there are horrors in your life, in your past, that the others don't have. I wonder if they would affect me more in that regard. I mean, given my challenging upbringing, shall we say, I think they would probably affect me more as well. Oh, there. Should dry out now. I accidentally spilled a bit, a little drop of cocoa there. You can barely tell it dropped there, right? Anyhow, a ray of wintry sunlight fell across the classroom, illuminating Lupin's gray hairs and the lines on his young face. The Mentors are among the foulest creatures that will rock this earth. They infest the darkest, filthiest places. They glory in decay and despair. They drain peace, hope, and happiness out of the air around them. Even muggles feel their presence, though they can't see them. Foreshadowing. Get too near a Dementor and every good feeling, every happy memory will be sucked out of you. If it can, the Dementor will feed on you long enough to reduce you something like itself. Soulless and evil. You will be left with nothing but the worst experiences of your life. And the worst that happened to you, Harry, is enough to make anyone fall off their broom. You have nothing to be ashamed of. When they get near me... Harry stared at Lupin's desk, his throat tight. I could hear Voldemort muttering my name. Lupin made a sudden motion with his arm, as though to grip Harry's shoulder, but thought better of it. There was a moment's silence, then... Why did they have to come to the match? Said Harry bitterly. I got too hungry, said Lupin coolly, shutting his briefcase with a snap. Dumbledore won't let them into the school, so their supply of human prey has dried up. I don't think they could resist the large crowd around the Quidditch field. All that excitement, emotions running high. It was their idea of a feast. Azkaban must be terrible. Harry muttered. Lupin nodded grimly. The fortress is set on a tiny island, way out to sea, but they don't need walls and water to keep the prisoners in. Not when they're all trapped inside their own heads, incapable of a single cheerful thought. Most of them go mad within weeks. But Sirius Black escaped from them, said Harry slowly. He got away. Lupin's briefcase slipped from the desk. He had to stoop quickly to catch it. Yes. he said, straightening up. Black must have found a way to fight them. I wouldn't have believed it possible. The mentors are supposed to drain a wizard of his powers. He's left them too long. You made that Dementor on the train back off, said Harry silently. There are certain defenses one can use. But there is only one Dementor on the train. The more there are, the more difficult it becomes to resist. What defenses? Said Harry at once. Can you change me? I don't pretend to be an expert at fighting Dementors, Harry. Quite the contrary. But if the Dementors come to another Quidditch match, I need to be able to fight them. Lupin looked into Harry's determined face, hesitated, then said, all right. I'll try and help. But it'll have to wait until next term, I'm afraid. I have a lot to do before the holidays. It was a very inconvenient time to holiday. With the promise of anti-Dementor lessons, I just love that, anti-Dementor, from Lupin, the thought that he might never have to hear his mother's death again, and the fact that Ravenclaw found Hufflepuff in their Quidditch match at the end of November, Harry's mood took a definite upturn. Gryffindor were not out of the running after all, although they could not afford to lose another match. Wood became repossessed of his manic energy and worked in his team as hard as ever in the chilly haze of rain that persisted into the summer. Harry saw no hint of a Dementor within the ground. Dumbledore's anger seemed to be keeping them at their stations at the entrances. 2 weeks before the end of term, the sky lightened suddenly to a dazzling, opaline white, and the muddy grounds were revealed one morning covered in glistening frost. Woohoo! Frozen mud! I don't have to get muddy! Inside the castle, there was a buzz of Christmas in the air. Well, I guess you could say this is Christmas in June? Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher, had already decorated his classroom with shimmering lights that turned out to be real fluttering fairies. How fitting, because they're called fairy lights. The students were all happily discussing their plans for the holidays. Both Ron and Hermione had decided to remain at Hogwarts. And though Ron said it was because he couldn't stand 2 weeks with Percy, and Hermione insisted she needed to use the library. Typical Hermione. Harry wasn't fooled. They were doing it to keep him company, and he was very grateful. I'd keep him company too, honestly. To everyone's delight except Harry's, there was to be another Hogsmeade trip on the very last weekend of term. We can do all of our Christmas shopping there, said Hermione. Mom and Dad would really love those 2 sparkling stream mints from Honeydukes. I don't think I came across those when I was at Honeydukes. Of course, I only been there once, and I didn't really have the chance to wander, so hopefully next time I visit. Resigned to the fact that he would be the only third year staying behind again, he borrowed a copy of Witch Broomstick from Wood, and decided to spend the day reading up on the different makes. He had been riding one of the schoolrooms at team practice, an ancient shooting star, which is very slow and jerky. He definitely needed a new broom of his own. On the Saturday morning of the Hogsmeade trip, Harry bid goodbye to Ron and Hermione, who were wrapped in cloaks and scarves, then turned up the marble staircase alone and headed back toward Gryffindor Tower. Snow had started to fall outside the windows, and the castle was very still and quiet. Psst, Harry! He turned halfway along the third-floor corridor to see Fred and George peering out at him from behind a statue of a humpbacked one-eyed witch. What are you doing? Said Harry curiously. How come you're not going to Hogsmeade? We've come to give you a bit of festive cheer before we go, said Fred with a mysterious wink. Okay, I cannot wait, so take this for what it's worth. Come in here. He nodded toward an empty classroom to the left of the one-eyed statue. Harry followed Fred and George inside. George closed the door quietly and then turned, beaming, to look at Harry. "I got a Christmas present for you," he said. Fred pulled something inside from his coat with a flourish and laid it on one of the desks. It was a large, square, very warm piece of parchment with nothing written on it. Harry, suspecting one of Fred and George's jokes, stared at it. "What's that supposed to be?" "This, Harry, is the secret to our success," said George, patting the parchment fondly. "It's a wrench giving it to you," said Fred. "We just added last night. Your need's greater than ours. Anyway, we know if I thought. We bequeathed it to you. You don't really need it anymore," said George. "And what do I need with a bit of old parchment?" said Harry. "A bit of old parchment," said Fred, closing his eyes with a grimace as though Harry had mortally offended him. "Explain, George." "Well, when we were in our first year, Harry, young, carefree, and innocent..." Harry snorted, like I did after reading that. He doubted whether Fred and George had ever been innocent. Oh, poor Molly. I can just see them I can see them causing all kinds of mischief in their first year, much to the dismay of Molly. I kind of feel bad for them. It is kind of funny. Well, more innocent than we are now. It's still pretty funny. We got into a spell of a bother with Filch. We let off a dumb bomb in the corner and then sudden for some reason. So he hauled us off to his office and started threatening us with the usual detention. Wow. That's cool. Filch. Filch is something. Just empowerment, and we couldn't help noticing a drawer in one of his filing cabinets marked confiscated and highly dangerous. Oh no. "Don't tell me," said Harry, starting to grin. "What would you have done?" said Fred. "George caused a diversion by dropping another dumb bomb. I whipped the drawer open and grabbed this." "It's not as bad as it sounds, you know," said George. "We don't reckon Filch ever found out how to work it. He probably suspected what it was, though, or he wouldn't have confiscated it." "And you know how to work it?" "Oh, yes," said Fred, smirking. "This little beauty's taught us more than all the teachers in this school." "You're winding me up," said Harry, looking at the ragged old bit of parchment. "Oh, are we?" said George. He took out his wand, touched the parchment lightly, and said, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good. Now, hang on. I have a treat for you." Well, it's ready to come, I think. Thank you, Libby, for this amazing mug. And at once, thin ink lines began to spread like a spider's web from the point that George's one had touched. They joined each other, they crisscrossed, they fanned into every corner of the parchment. Then words began to blossom across the top, great curly green words that proclaimed. And pay attention to the order. It becomes very pivotal to the main series. I don't want to make spoilers, but pay attention. Marauders, moony, worm-tailed, pet-footed clowns, purveyors of aids to magical mischief makers, are proud to present the Marauders map. It was a map showing every detail of Hogwarts Castle on the ground. But the truly remarkable thing were the tiny ink dots moving around it, each labeled with a name in minuscule writing. Astounded, Harry bent over it. A labeled dot in the top left corner showed that Professor Dumbledore was pacing in his study. The caretaker's cat, Mrs. Norris, was prowling around the second floor, and Peeves the poltergeist was currently bouncing around the trophy room. And as Harry's eyes traveled up and down the familiar corridors, he noticed something else. The map showed a set of passages he had never entered, and many of them seemed to lead right into Hogsmeade, said Fred, tracing one of them with his finger. There are 7 in all. Now Filch knows about these 4, he pointed them out, but we're sure we're the only ones who know about these. Don't bother with the one behind the mirror of the 4th floor. We used it last winter, but it's caved in, completely blocked. And we don't reckon anyone's ever used this one because the one was planted right over the entrance. But this one here, this one leads into a cellar in Honeydukes. We've used it loads of times. And as you might have noticed, the entrance is right outside this room, through that one-eyed old crone's home. Moony, worm-tailed, pat-footed crones, sighed George, patting the heading of the map. We owe them so much. Noble men, working tirelessly to help a generation of lawbreakers, said Fred solemnly. Right, said George. Don't forget to wipe it after you use it, or anyone can read it, said Fred warningly. Just have it again and say, mischief managed. And it'll go blank. Thank you again, Livy, for the excellent mug. It made an excellent prop. So young, Harry, said Fred in an uncanny impersonation of Percy. Mind you, you behave yourself. See you in Honeydukes, said George winking. Again, I don't know how to blink for our voice, so take this for what it's worth. They left the room both smirking in a satisfied sort of way. Harry stood there, gazing at the miraculous map. I'm sorry, but I am a fan of miraculous, so the first thing that came to mind was miraculous, sympathy to the test, up to the test when things go wrong. Sorry, I couldn't resist. He watched the tiny ink. Mrs. Norris turned left and paused to sniff at something on the floor. If Filch really didn't know, he wouldn't have to pass the Dementors at all. But even as he stood there, flooded with excitement, something Harry had once heard Mrs. Weasley say came floating out of his memory. Never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see why it keeps its brain. Nice callback to the last book. This map had been one of those dangerous magical objects Mr. Weasley had been warning against. Aids for magical mischief makers. But then, Harry reasoned, he only wanted it to get into Hogsmeade. It wasn't as though he wanted to steal anything or attack anyone. And Fred and George had been using them for years without anything horrible happening. Harry traced the secret passage to Honeydukes with his finger. Then quite suddenly, as though following orders, he rolled up the map, stuffed it inside his robes, and hurried to the door of the classroom. He opened it a couple of inches. There was no one outside. Very carefully he edged out of the room and behind the statue of the one-eyed witch. What did he have to do? He pulled out the map again and saw, to his astonishment, that a new ink figure had appeared upon it, labeled Harry Potter. I love me some cocoa. The figure was standing exactly where the real Harry was standing, about halfway down the third floor corridor. Harry watched carefully. His little ink self appeared to be tapping the witch with his minute wand. Harry quickly took out his real wand and tapped the statue. He looked back to the map. The tiniest speech bubble appeared next to his figure. The word inside said, Descendium. Descendium! Harry whispered, tapping the stone witch again. At once, the statue's hump opened wide enough to admit a very thin person. Harry glanced quickly up and down the corridor, then tucked the map away again, hoisted himself into the hole head first, and pushed himself over. He slid a considerable way down what felt like a stone slide, then landed on cold, damp earth. He stood up, looking around. It was pitch dark. He held up his wand, muttered Lumos, and saw that he was in a very narrow, low, earthy passageway. He raised the map, tapped it with the tip of his wand, and muttered, Mischief managed. The map went blank at once. He folded it carefully, tucked it inside his robe, then, heart beating fast, both excited and apprehensive, he set off. The passage twisted and turned, more like the burrow of a giant rabbit than anything else. Harry hurried along it, stumbling now and then on the uneven floor, holding his wand out in front of him. It took ages, but Harry had the thought of Honeydukes to sustain him. After what felt like an hour, the passage began to rise. Panting, Harry sped up, his face hot, his feet very cold. 10 minutes later, he came to the foot of some worn stone steps, which rose out of sight above him. Careful not to make any noise, Harry began to climb. 100 steps, 200 steps. He lost count as he climbed. Wow. I would have lost count at the first, 30. Watching his feet, then without warning, his head hit something hard. It seemed to be a trapdoor. Harry stood there, massaging the top of his head, listening. He couldn't hear any sounds above him. Very slowly, he pushed the trapdoor open and peered over the edge. He was in the cellar, which was full of wooden crates and boxes. Harry climbed out of the trapdoor and replaced it. It blended perfectly with the dusty floor that it was impossible to tell that it was there. Harry crept slowly to the wooden staircase that led upstairs. Now he could definitely hear voices, not to mention the tinkle of the bell, ding, and the opening and shutting of a door. Wondering what he ought to do, he suddenly heard a door open much closer at hand. Someone was about to come downstairs. And get another box of jelly socks, dear. They nearly cleaned us out. Excuse me, said a woman's voice. A pair of feet was coming down the staircase. Harry leapt behind an enormous crate and waited for the footsteps to pass. He heard the man shifting boxes against the opposite wall. He might not get another chance. Quickly and silently, Harry dodged out from his hiding place and climbed the stairs. Looking back, he saw an enormous backside and shiny bald head buried in a box. Harry reached the door at the top of the stairs, slipped through it, and found himself behind the counter of Honeydukes. He ducked, crept sideways, then straightened up. Honeydukes was so crowded with Hogwarts students that no one looked twice at Harry. Crowds. What a way to get your anxiety going. He edged among them, looking around and suppressed a laugh at the look that would spread over Dudley's piggy face if he could see where Harry was now. Oh, I'm sorry. I cannot suppress my laughter like Harry. I cannot. I just can't. There were shelves upon shelves of the most succulent-looking sweets imaginable. Creamy chunks of nougat. Shimmering pink squares of coconut ice. I love coconut. Especially the coconut the toasted marshmallows with the coconut on them. Those are delicious. They really are. Fat honey-covered toffees. Hundreds of different kinds of chocolates in neat rows. I want to visit Honeydukes again. Why does Honeydukes have to be so many states away? There was a large barrel of every flavor beans, and another of fizzing Whizbees, the levitating sherbet balls that Ron had mentioned. Along yet another wall were special effects suites, Dribble's best blowing gum, foreshadowing, which filled a room with bluebell-colored bubbles that refused to pop for days. The strange, splintery tooth-flossing stringments, tiny black pepper imps, breathe fire for your friends, ice mice, hear your teeth chatter and squeak. Peppermint cream shaped like toads pop realistically in the stomach. Fragile sugar spun quills. I have some of those, but I never ate them before. And yeah, because honestly, why would you ruin something so pretty? And exploding bonbons. Harry squeezed himself through a crowd of 6 years and saw a sign hanging in the farthest corner of the shop. Unusual taste. Ron and Hermione were standing underneath it, examining a tray of blood-flavored lollipops. Harry sneaked up behind them. No, Harry wouldn't want one of those. They're for vampires, I expect. Hermione was saying. What about these? Said Ron, shoving a jar of cockroach clusters under Hermione's nose. Ugh. No, I don't even want to know what they're made of. But something tells me not peanuts and chocolate. Ugh. But that does remind me that those are pretty good. Especially my great-grandpa Silva, he's... Definitely not, said Harry. Ron nearly dropped the jar. I kind of would too. Harry! Squealed Hermione. What are you doing here? How did you... Wow! Said Ron, looking very impressed. You've learned to operate! Of course I haven't, said Harry. He dropped his voice so that none of the 6 years could hear him and told him all about the Marauder's map. How come Fred and George never gave it to me? Said Ron, outraged. I'm their brother! But Harry isn't going to keep it, said Hermione as though the idea were ludicrous. He's going to hand it in to Professor McGonagall, aren't you, Harry? No, I'm not, said Harry. Are you mad? Said Ron, goggling at Hermione. And it's something that good. If I hand it in, I'll have to say where I got it. Filch would know that Fred and George had nicked it. But what about Sirius Black? Hermione hissed. He could be using one of the passages on that map to get into the castle. The teachers have got to know. He can't be getting into a passage, said Harry quickly. There are 7 secret tunnels on the map, right? Fred and George reckon Filch already knows about 4 of them. And of the other 3, one of them's caved in, so that no one can get through it. One of them's got the walking window planted over the entrance, so you can't get out of it. And the one that just came through, well, it was really hard to see where the entrance to it down the cellar, so unless he knew it was there... Harry hesitated. What if Black did know the passage was there? Ron, however, cleared his throat significantly and pointed to a notice pasted on the inside of the sweet shop door. By order of the Ministry of Magic, customers are reminded that until further notice, the Mentors will be patrolling the streets of Hogsmeade every night after sundown. This measure has been put in place for the safety of Hogsmeade residents and will be lifted upon the recapture of Sirius Black. It is therefore advisable that you complete your shopping well before nightfall. Merry Christmas! See? Said Ron quietly. I'd like to see Black and try and break into Honeydukes with Dementors swarming all over the village. Anyway, Hermione, the Honeyduke soldiers would hear a break-in, wouldn't they? They'd live over the shop. Yes, but... Hermione seemed to be struggling to find another problem. Look, Harry still shouldn't be coming into Hogsmeade. He hasn't got a signed form. If anyone finds out, he'll be in so much trouble. And it's not for nightfall yet. What if Sirius Black turned up today? How? He'd have a job spotting Harry in this, said Ron, nodding through the mullioned windows at the thick, swirling snow. Uh-oh. Who made Elsa mad? Come on, Hermione, it's Christmas. Harry deserves a break. Hermione bit her lip, looking extremely worried. Are you going to report me? Harry asked her, grinning. Oh, of course not. But honestly, Harry. Seen the Fizzy Wispies, Harry, said Ron, grabbing him and leading him over to their barrel. And the jelly slugs, and the acid pops. Dad gave me one of those when I was 7. It burned a hole right through my tongue. I remember Mum walloping him with her broomstick. Wow! Hidden deaths, Molly. You must have been quite the Quidditch player in your younger years. But also explain how most of your children became good Quidditch players anyhow. Wouldn't it? Like, really? I know I said this before, but make a series on Arthur and Molly's Hogwarts years! Ron stared broodingly into the acid pop box. Reckon Fred will take a bit of cockroach cluster if I told him they were peanuts. I practically foreshadowed that. When Ron and Hermione had paid for all their sweets, the 3 of them left Honeydukes for the wizard outside. Again. Who made Elsa mad? Hogsmeade looked like a Christmas card. The little thatched cottages and shops were all covered in a layer of crisp snow. There were holly wreaths on the doors and strings of enchanted candles hanging in the trees. Harry shivered. Unlike the other 2, he didn't have his cloak. They headed up the street, heads bowed against the wind. Ron and Hermione shouting through their scarves. That's the post office. Zonka's is up there. We could go up to the stricken shop. Tell you what, said Ron, his teeth chattered. Shall we go for a butterbeer and the 3 broomsticks? Again with the butterbeer. Super delicious. Harry was more willing. The wind was fierce and his hands were freezing, so they crossed the road, and in a few minutes they were entering the tiny inn. It was extremely crowded. Again with the anxiety. Noisy, warm, and smoky. A curvy sort of woman with a pretty face was serving a bunch of rowdy warlocks up at the bar. "That's Madame Murta," said Ron. "I'll get the drinks, shall I?" he added, going slightly red. Harry and Hermione made their way to the back of the room, where there was a small vacant table between the window and a handsome Christmas tree which stood next to the fireplace. Ron came back 5 minutes later, carrying 3 foaming tankards of hot butterbeer. I had it cold. It just makes more sense that way. "Merry Christmas," he said happily, raising his tankard. Harry drank deeply. It was the most delicious thing he'd ever tasted, and seemed to heat every bit of him from the inside. A sudden breeze ruffled his hair. The door of the 3 broomsticks had opened again. Harry looked over the rim of his tankard and choked. Professors McGonagall and Flitwick had just entered the pub with a fury of snowflakes shortly followed by Hagrid, who was in deep conversation with a portly man in a lime green bowler hat and pinstriped cloak. Oh, bright colors are a nightmare. Cornelius Fudge, Minister of Magic. In an instant, Ron and Hermione had placed both hands on the top of Harry's head and forced him off his stool and under the table. Dripping with butterbeer and crouching out of sight, Harry clutched his empty tankard and watched the teakers and Fudge feet morph toward the bar, paused, then turned and walked right toward him. Somewhere above him, Hermione whispered, "Mephidiopes!" The Christmas tree beside their table rose a few inches off the ground, drifted sideways, and landed with a soft thumb right in front of their table, hiding them from view. Staring through the dense willow branches, Harry saw 4 sets of chair legs move back from the table right beside theirs. They heard grunts and sighs of the teachers and the minister as they sat down. Next he saw another pair of feet wearing sparkly turquoise high heels. Wonder if she's related to Elsie in some way. I will think on it. And heard a woman's voice. "A small gilly water?" "Mine," said Professor McGonagall's voice. Gilly water is delicious. I had a bottle of it when I was at Universal, and it's not that bad, actually. I'd like to know what's in it. Other than the usual water, of course. 4 pints of Hogsmeade. "Thank you, Rosmata," said Hagrid. "A cherry syrup and soda with ice in an umbrella." Said Professor Flitwick, smacking his lip. "Yeah, that does sound good, actually." "So you'll be the red currant rum minister?" "Thank you, Rosemary, my dear," said Fudge. "Lovely to see you again, I must say. Have them yourself, won't you? Come and join us." "Well, thank you very much, Minister." Harry watched the glittering heels march away and back again. His heart was pounding uncomfortably in his throat. Why hadn't it occurred to him that this was the last weekend of term for the teachers, too? And how long were they going to sit there? He needed time to sneak back into Honeydukes if he wanted to return to the school tonight. Hermione's leg gave a nervous twitch next to him. "So, what brings you to this neck of the woods, Minister?" came Madame Murta's voice. Harry saw the lower part of Fudge's thick body twist in his chair as though he were checking for eavesdroppers. Then he said in a quiet voice, "What else, my dear, but Sirius Black? I dare say you've heard what happened about the school telling." "I did hear a rumour," admitted Madame Murta. "Did you tell the whole pub, Hagrid?" said Professor McGonagall exasperatedly. You think Black's still in the area, Minister? Whispered Madame Rosemerton. I'm sure of it, said Fudge shortly. You know that the Dementors have searched my pub twice, said Madame Rosemerton with a slight edge to her voice. Scared all my customers away. It's very bad for business, Minister. Rosemerton, my dear, I don't like them any more than you do, said Fudge uncomfortably. Necessary precaution. Unfortunate, but there you are. I've just met some of them. They're in a fury against Dumbledore. He won't let them inside the castle grounds. I should think not, said Professor McGonagall sharply. How are we supposed to teach with those horrors floating around? You hear? Squeaked tiny Professor Flitwick, whose feet were dangling a foot from the ground. We love you, Flitwick. All the same, demurred Fudge, they are here to protect you all for something much worse. We all know that Black's capable of. Do you know, I still have trouble believing it, said Madame Rosemerton softly. Of all the people to go over to the dark side... Star Wars reference. Sirius Black was the last I had thought. I remember him when he was a boy at Hogwarts. If you told me then what he was going to become, I'd have said you had too much meat. You don't know the half of it, Rosemerton, said Fudge gruffly. The worst he did isn't widely known. The worst? Said Madame Rosemerton, her voice alive with curiosity. Worse than murdering all those poor people, you mean? I certainly do, said Fudge. I can't believe that. What could possibly be worse? You say you remember him at Hogwarts, Rosemerton, murmured Professor wrong voice. You say you remember him at Hogwarts, Rosemerton, murmured Professor McGonagall. Do you remember who his best friend was? Naturally, said Manager Myrtle with a small laugh. Never saw one without the other, did you? The numbers of times I had them in here, oh, they used to make me laugh. Quite the double act, Sirius Black and James Potter. Harry dropped his tankard with a loud clunk. Ron kicked him. Precisely, said Professor McGonagall. Black and Potter, ringleaders of a little gang. Both very bright, of course, exceptionally bright, in fact. But I don't think we've ever had such a pair of troublemakers. I don't know, chuckled Harry. Red and George Weasley could give them a run for their money. They probably could. You'd have thought Black and Potter were brothers, chimed in Professor Poe. Inseparable. Of course they were, said Fudge. Potter trusted Black beyond all his other friends. Nothing changed when they left school. Black was the best man when James married Lily. Then they named him godfather to Harry. Harry has no idea, of course. Well, now he knows. You can imagine how the idea would torment him. Because Black turned out to be in league with you-know-who, whispered Madame Rosemerton. What's the matter, my dear? Fudge dropped his voice and proceeded in a rumble. Not many people are aware that the Potters knew you-know-who was coming after them. Dumbledore, who was of course working tirelessly against you-know-who, had a number of useful spies. One of them tipped him off, and he alerted James and Lily at once. He advised them to go into hiding. But of course, you-know-who wasn't an easy person to hide from. Dumbledore told them that their best chance was the Viridia's charm. How does that work? Said Madame Rosemerton, breathless with interest. Professor Flitwick cleared his throat. An immensely complex spell, he said squeakily, involving the magical concealment of a secret inside a secret living soul. The information is hidden inside the chosen person or secret keeper, and is henceforth impossible to find, unless of course the secret keeper chooses to divulge. As long as the secret keeper refused to speak, you know who could search the village where Lily and James were staying for years and never find them. Not even if he had his nose pressed against the sitting room window. So Black was the Potter's secret keeper, whispered Madame George Martin. Well, yes and no. We'll get into the no later in the story. Naturally, said Professor Malone. James Potter told Dumbledore that Black would die rather than tell where they were, and that Black was planning to go into hiding himself. And yet, Dumbledore remained worried. I remember him offering to be the Potter's secret keeper himself. He suspected Black? Gasped Madame George Martin. He was so sure that somebody close to the Potters had been you know who, informed of their movements, said Professor McGonagall. Indeed, he had suspected for some time that someone on our side had turned traitor, a la Benedict Arnold, and was passing a lot of information to you know who. But James Potter insisted on using Black. He did, said Fudge Heavily, and then barely a week after the Fidelius trial had been performed, Black betrayed them? Breathed Madame George Martin. He did indeed. Black was tired of his double agent role. He was ready to declare his support openly for you know who, and he seems to have planned for this for the moment of the Potter's death. But as we all know, you know who met his downfall in little Harry Potter. Harry's gone, horribly weakened, he fled, and this left Black in a nasty position indeed. His master had fallen at the very moment when he, Black, had shown his true colors as a traitor. He had no choice but to run for it. Filthy stinking turncoat, Hagrid said so loudly that half the bar went quiet. Shh, said Professor McGonagall. I met him, growled Hagrid. I must have been the last to see him before he killed all them people. It was mine that rescued Harry from Lily and James' house after they were killed. Just got him out of the ruins, poor little thing, with a great slash on his forehead and his parents dead. And Sirius Black turns up on a flying motorbike he used to ride. Never occurred to me what he was doing there. I just didn't know he'd been Lily and John's secret keeper. Thought he just heard the news of you know who's attacking coming to see what he could do. When and shaken he was. And you know what I did? I comforted the murderer traitor, Hagrid roared. Hagrid, please, said Professor McGonagall. Keep your voice down. How I to know he wasn't upset about Lily and John. It was you know who he cared about. And then he says, give Harry to me, Hagrid. I'm his godfather. I'll look after him. Huh. But I had my orders from Dumbledore, and I told Black no. Dumbledore said Harry was to go to his aunt and uncle's. Black argued, but in the end he gave in. Told me to take his motorbike to get Harry there. Won't need it anymore, he says. I should have known something was fishy going on then. He loved that motorbike. Why was he giving it to me for? Why wouldn't he need it anymore? Fact was, it was too easy to trace. Dumbledore knew he had been the Potter's secret keeper. Black knew he was going to have to run for it that night. Knew it was a matter of hours before the Ministry was after him. But what if I'd given Harry to May? I bet he would have pitched him off the bike halfway out to sea. His best one's son. But when a wizard goes over to the dark side, again Star Wars reference, there's nothing and no one that matters to them anymore. A long silence followed Hagrid's story. Then Madame George said with some satisfaction, but he didn't manage to disappear, did he? The Ministry of Magic caught him with him the next day. Alas, if only we had. It was not we who found him, it was little Peter Pettigrew, another of the Potter's friends, maddened by grief no doubt, and knowing that Black had been the Potter's secret keeper, went after Black himself. Pettigrew, that fat little boy who was always tagging around after them at Hogwarts, said Madame George Mercer. Hero worshipped Black and Potter, said Professor McGonagall. Never quite in their league, talent-wise. I was often rather sharp with him. You can imagine how I regret that now. She sounded as though she had a sudden head cold. Then I'll never, said Butch Henry. Pettigrew died of hero's death. Eyewitnesses, muggles of course. We wiped their memories later. Told us how Pettigrew cornered Black. They say he was sobbing. Lily and Giles. Sirius, how could you? And then he went for his wand. But of course Black was quicker. Blew Pettigrew to smithereens. Professor McGonagall blew her nose and said thickly, Stupid boy! Foolish boy! It was always hopeless at Dolly's. Should have left it to the ministry. I tell you, if I got back before little Pettigrew there, I would have messed him around the pond. I would have ripped him limb from limb. Hagrid rapped. Hagrid growled. You don't know what you're talking about, Hagrid, said Budge sharply. Nobody but trained hit wizards from the magical law enforcement squad would have stood a chance against Black once he was cornered. I was junior minister in the Department of Magical Catastrophes at the time, and I was one of the first on the scene after Black murdered all those people. I will never forget it. I still dream about it sometimes. A crater in the middle of the street, so deep it had curved the sewer below. Bodies everywhere, muggles screaming, and Black standing there laughing, with what was left of Pettigrew in front of him. A heap of blood-stained robes and a few fragments. Budge's voice stopped abruptly. There was the sound of 5 noses being blown. Well, there you have it, Mercer, said Budge thickly. Black was taken away by 20 members of the magical law enforcement squad, and Pettigrew received the Order of Merlin first class, which I think was some comfort to his poor mother. Black's been in Azkaban ever since. Madame George Mercer went out alongside. Is it true he's mad, Minister? I wish I could say that he was, said Budge slowly. I certainly believe his master's defeat unhinged him for a while. The murder of Pettigrew and all those muggles was the action of a cornered and desperate man. Cruel quaintness. Yet I met Black on my last inspection of Azkaban. You know, most of their prisoners sit there muttering themselves in the dark. There's no sense in them. But I was really shocked at how normal Black seemed. He spoke rather rationally to me. It was unnerving. You'd have thought he was merely bored. Asked if I was finished with my paper. Was you please? He said he was doing the crossword. I love a good crossword. And I'm sure we all enjoy some now and then. Yes, I was astounded at how little effect the Dementors seemed to be having on him. And he was one of the most heavily guarded in the place, you know. Dementors outside his door day and night. But what do you think he's broken out to do? Said Madame Ersmert. Good gracious, Minister, he isn't trying to rejoin you, is he? I dare say that is his eventual plan, said Budge evasively. But we do hope to catch Black long before that. I must say, you left him alone and friendless is one thing. But give him back his most devoted servant, and I shudder to think how quickly he'll rise again. Foreshadowing. There was a small clink of glass on wood. Someone had put on their glass. You know, Cornelius, if you're dining with the headmaster, we had better head back up to the castle, said Professor McGonagall. One by one, the pairs of feet in front of Harry took the weight of their owners once more. Hands of both swung into sight, and Madame Rosemart's glittering ears disappeared behind the bar. The door of the three broomsticks opened again, and there was another flurry of snow, and the teachers had disappeared. Harry! Ron and Hermione's faces appeared under the table. They were both staring at him, lost for words. And that is the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed it. Join me next week for Chapter 11, The Firebolt. Bye!